Hey guys, I just wanted to give you some of my thoughts and opinions and reactions to the Beta XPro, which I've recently been able to spend some time on. Now, this bike is set up for a very short girl rider. Later on in the video, we'll talk about the protection parts that we found to put on the bike and what we recommend and how we set it up for Catherine being so short. Talk about some of the suspension upgrades. Now, Catherine is coming off the very popular Beta Xtrainer. And so the XPro is like the slightly bigger brother than the Xtrainer. Slightly wider, little bit heavier, little bit more power, a little bit snappier, not quite as restricted as the Xtrainer. We're going to get into the pros and cons of that for the shorter rider. Should you get the Xtrainer or the XPro? Both very capable bikes. The Xtrainer is way more capable than many people are aware of. Now, with both bikes, we've had some mild headaches and some growing pains with them, learning about them, some electrical things with both bikes, the Xtrainer and the XPro. But in our experience, once we've gotten those kinks worked out like we did with the Xtrainer and now with the XPro, the bike seems to be pretty flawless. There's lots of things to consider between the Xtrainer and the XPro if you're really on the fence between the two. Now, in the off-road world, there are so many different models to choose from, whereas in motocross, it's like they have the motocross version and you just get that. So it can be sort of hard unless you're really reading all the forums and reading everything to know exactly what a bike is before you're going to get it. And one of the mistakes we made, and I think a lot of people are wondering about with the Beta, is I think the perception is that it is an Xtrainer with upgraded suspension or upgraded parts, or it's an Xtrainer with the more powerful motor. Let's just say right off the bat, it is not that. It is roughly 15 to 20 pounds heavier, and you can feel that, and it is a little bit wider, so it's a different frame, but it has a very similar power band and motor characteristic as the Xtrainer, which we like. It's just a little bit snappier, a little bit more power with a little bit bigger suspension on it. So a lot of people are wondering about the XPro suspension upgrades. Now, although the suspension on the XPro is upgraded, it's 48mm forks as opposed to 43mm forks that you'd find on the Xtrainer. It does have beefier suspension, can take bigger hits right from the get-go, and they can handle quite a bit more without blowing seals or blowing the shock apart. You can get a lot more time out of this suspension than the stock Xtrainer stuff. Now, keep in mind, if you do go to upgrade the suspension, it is Sachs suspension, a company that a lot of suspension companies don't normally deal with, so you got to make sure, does your suspension guy have the tools to even work on that kind of suspension? How much money are you going to put into upgrading versus if you had an Xtrainer with upgraded suspension, or maybe you want to consider a full-size bike with a little bit better suspension if you're going to be going a lot faster or if you're on a higher skill level. Now, as nice as it is to have an upgraded platform to be working with on the Beta XPro, the forks feel a little bit awkward compared to what we're used to and the way we run it for the kind of riding that we do. So we're still going to send our suspension off to Corey at Ride Suspension, revalve, respring, and get rid of some of the harshness that we're feeling in the front end. Now, there are a lot of folks that aren't aware of the Xtrainer. However, there is a serious cult following and underground Xtrainer society that I've found in many different disciplines of riding. It could be because it's a 7/8 scale, it's a little bit smaller, easier to maneuver in the trails and more technical riding. It's a little bit lighter, shorter wheelbase than the full-size RR or the full-size KTM 300 style. And within those groups, particularly the hard enduro and technical trail riding groups, there's guys that do all kinds of upgrades to these bikes to get them working a little bit closer to the full-size bikes with that sweet low-end smooth torque that the Xtrainer's become famous for. Realistically, the bike is sort of in between sizes, same wheelbase as the Xtrainer, but a little bit bigger frame, a little bit wider feeling, and heavier. And this isn't a knock on Beta, but we really felt like the bike was being touted as this other more powerful Xtrainer, and that's really not the case, as we've found. In my opinion, the 300RR Race Edition has quite a bit more bark and grunt and just overall power than the XPro. That had
had to feel cool.
The XPro is really more of its own thing, size-wise, with a really similar ergonomics and ride feel to both RR Race Edition and the Xtrainer, fitting into that beta feel overall, but with the unmistakable low-end torque of the Xtrainer, which is just so forgiving in the more technical situations. It's almost hard to break your wheel loose as the ground becomes more slippery. Now, in my opinion, Beta has done an extremely fine job in getting their ergonomics, cockpit, and ride feel really dialed, not only on the Xtrainer, but the new XPro, as well as the Beta RR Race Editions. I really like the ergonomics. It takes me no time to get off my KTM and get on the XPro, and I feel right at home. Now, obviously, when you have lower ground clearance, the center of the frame, the motor, everything's a little bit lower, there are performance benefits to having that, but you can high center and get hung up on the case quite a bit easier once you start getting into the log situations or more technical rock situations. I think the average person who want this bike using it for trail riding, you're not going to experience a lot of that. I personally did a little bit riding it because we have it so low, but the benefits of the power characteristics of the Beta X Pro and the ergonomics and the way it feels, in my opinion, far outweigh that little bit lower ground clearance, which is actually going to save most short riders who are getting this bike more often.
I don't get it!
We did have a few headaches fairly soon after we purchased the bike. The first thing that went bad was the starter stop switch, which ended up leaving Catherine stranded out on a desert fire road far away from her truck, which she had to push back for quite a ways. So that was a little bit frustrating. Luckily, she called Upstate Cycle out in North Carolina where she purchased the bike, and they were able to diagnose what it was on the trail. We got a new one sent out immediately, got that back on the bike, started it up. We noticed a couple rides in after putting the new starter switch on that it was becoming more and more rich. More and more smoke was coming out the exhaust, more oil was coming out, and at first we're like, this is normal. So we started turning air screw, fuel screw, getting the carb more dialed, rejetted it. We thought we had it okay. Then she ended up going out to Moab for a hard enduro race, and it was just splooging out oil. She went through like all of her oil. So essentially the oil injection started giving it all the oil, running all the oil out of her oil injector tank. So this ended up taking Catherine out of her race. Bike just wouldn't run. And what we ended up having to do was do an oil injection delete kit, which means we have to mix gas, which is not the end of the world. The oil injection is really convenient and nice, and I wouldn't be too scared. I haven't heard of a lot of them failing. Doesn't seem to be happening a lot these days. Now, we do have a friend who also got an Xtrainer last year, and the stator came bad on it right away. This kind of stuff can happen. But all in all, once we got it back together, everything's good now. Been beating the heck out of it the last few hours of riding, and it seems to be working perfectly. Get all the kinks worked out of this bike. It's hard to knock anything about it. Now, Bulletproof Designs does have a line of really good protection parts and that are actually plenty sufficient for the kind of riding we do through the rocks and stuff. Radiator guards, disc guards, and these were put on at the dealership by Upstate Cycle in South Carolina for us. After Catherine purchased the bike, the owner was nice enough to throw these parts on for her, and absolutely necessary for the kind of riding we do. This is a TM fork lug protector here. These are really important as well because the forks, if something happens, that could be bad. So, and then the foot pegs are 5 millimeters down and 5 back. Those are Motoes, MOTOES. And then just to make the brake pedal a little bit more accessible and move it a little farther back for Catherine's small feet, she got this adjustable brake tip. The fork guards are really important. There's a few different companies that make these full wrap fork guards. Crosslink Components has a really nice set of them, but they weren't in stock when we got these, so probably give those a try when they're out. But yeah, the full wrap is really necessary. You can see this one doesn't go all the way down. The cross-linked ones go all the way down, and I think the Pro Tech ones do as well. Of course, no need for the rear tail light if we're going to be doing wheelies and potentially breaking it off. SXS handguards, really, really strong and also protect the perch a little bit. They have an extra brace on top there that protects things a little bit more. And of course, the best skid plate in the biz, SXS. Then we got one of these T-Rex throttle housings. It's machine billet aluminum with a bulletproof glass see-through thing, inspection window they call it, I think. If you think there's a chance you could be tipping over a lot, I would say this is a very necessary upgrade. And of course these upper guards that go above the triple clamp and below are called Dingo's fork guards. We run these NSX Factor lift straps, just really strong and durable, just in case we're getting stuck. We need them for hard enduro in a lot of situations. And of course, best for last, we've been running these Plus tires. If you go back on my YouTube channel, I have a few different videos talking about the tires. These things are just really incredible. Game changer for especially technical trail riding. So to wrap the video up, what is my verdict on this bike? Overall, I think it's one of the most dynamic bikes available for off-road riding. I think you could get this bike as a beginner and you could go hit motocross, trail riding, you could even get into some advanced hard enduro and actually be benefited pretty darn good in the more technical riding because of that mellow, tameable power. You're gonna save a lot of energy. If you have the skills for it, you can still accomplish extreme things on this bike as well. But if you're considering getting an XPro because you think it's a smaller bike with a full-size snappy motor, I would beware on that because I think it would take modifications to the motor, possibly carburetor, to get it closer to that more high-end 300 power of the race edition betas. And if you're a smaller beginner rider on the fence between an Xtrainer or an XPro, keep in mind the Xtrainer is a good 15-20 pounds at least lighter, and you can really feel that when you're riding it, and it is a little bit more narrow. So if you're a smaller rider already, the Xtrainer can still get just about anything done, especially if you are lighter.